What happens when a calm, charismatic Hollywood icon walks onto one of the most unpredictable talk shows on television, only to be hit with questions he never saw coming? The studio lights glow like 1,000 tiny suns reflecting off the polished floor. Cameras slide silently across the stage on motorized tracks. Producers whisper into headsets. The audience buzzes with anticipation, the way crowds do when they sense something unusual is about to unfold. And then the music swells. The crowd erupts into applause as Johnny Depp steps onto the stage of The View. He walks with that familiar, slightly mysterious swagger, dark glasses, layered rings catching the studio lights, his expression calm but observant. For a moment, it feels like the atmosphere softens around him. People smile. Some fans in the audience gasp quietly. This is the man who brought Captain Jack Sparrow to life in the legendary Pirates of the Caribbean films. A performer who built an entire career around eccentric brilliance. But today, something feels different. Before we dive into this tense moment, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, hit the like button, and drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Because the story you're about to witness gets intense. Johnny reaches the couch. The hosts greet him with practiced smiles. Among them sits Joy Behar. Her expression is sharp, curious, almost analytical. Anyone who has watched the show knows Joy's reputation. Quick wit, fearless questions, and a habit of saying what others might hesitate to ask. Johnny takes a seat. The applause fades. For a moment, everything seems routine. Another host begins the conversation. Johnny, welcome. It's great to have you here. Johnny tilts his head slightly, offering a polite smile. Thank you kindly. Happy to be here. The audience claps again. At first, the interview flows smoothly. They talk about his latest projects, the art of acting, and the strange, creative process behind building characters. Johnny leans back, relaxed. You know, he says softly, his voice carrying that distinctive drawl. Sometimes a character sort of finds you. You don't chase them. They appear like an old friend. The audience laughs gently. But Joy Behar is watching closely. She taps her pen against her notes. Tap, tap, tap. Then she leans forward. Her tone shifts slightly. Johnny, she says, her voice calm but direct. You've had one of the most unusual careers in Hollywood. Huge successes, incredible characters. But also some very public challenges. The audience grows quieter. Johnny's smile tightens just a little. He nods slowly. Well, he replies, life tends to do that. A few chuckles ripple through the crowd. Joy doesn't laugh. She continues. Many people watched the headlines over the past few years, she says carefully. Courtrooms, lawsuits, controversies. Some fans stood by you. Others questioned everything. A murmur spreads through the audience. Johnny's fingers tap lightly on his knee. He remains composed, but the energy in the room begins to shift. One of the other hosts quickly jumps in, trying to keep things light. But today we're here to talk about your new film. Joy raises her hand slightly. Actually, she says, still looking at Johnny, I think our viewers are curious about something deeper. The audience becomes very still. Johnny removes his sunglasses slowly. The gesture alone changes the atmosphere. His eyes, sharp, observant, unreadable, meet Joy's. For a split second, you can almost hear the cameras humming. Johnny speaks carefully. What would that be? Joy flips a page on her notes. After everything that happened publicly, did Hollywood turn its back on you? Gasps ripple through the audience. A producer offstage raises his eyebrows. This was not the question expected this early in the interview. Johnny pauses. Just for a moment. He folds his hands together. Well, he says slowly, that's a complex question. Joy leans back slightly, but her gaze doesn't waver. Take your time. The tension grows. Johnny glances briefly at the audience, as if measuring the mood in the room. You know, he begins quietly. I've been working in this business for over 30 years. Long enough to understand that the tide comes in, and the tide goes out. The audience listens closely. Sometimes people stand beside you, he continues. Sometimes they step away. Joy interrupts gently. But did it hurt? The word lands heavily. Hurt. Johnny exhales. A long, thoughtful breath. Of course it did, he says softly. The room falls silent. For the first time, the audience sees a glimpse of vulnerability behind the eccentric movie star. Joy nods. But some people argue that accountability is important, she continues. They say celebrities shouldn't escape tough questions. Johnny's eyebrow lifts slightly. And do you believe I have? Joy smiles faintly. I believe viewers deserve honesty. A wave of whispers moves through the crowd. The other hosts shift in their seats. This interview is starting to feel less like a casual talk show segment and more like a confrontation. Johnny tilts his head again, studying Joy. You're asking for honesty? Yes, Joy replies. Johnny chuckles quietly. Well, that can be dangerous. The audience laughs nervously. Joy grins. Dangerous television is good television. Johnny leans forward now. His voice lowers slightly. All right then. The studio lights seem brighter somehow. More intense. Here's honesty, he says. I've made mistakes. I've trusted people I shouldn't have trusted. I've said things in anger. But I've also been accused of things that simply were not true. The audience murmurs again. Joy's eyes narrow slightly. But millions of people watched that story unfold, she says. Yes, Johnny replies. And many formed opinions. Exactly. Joy flips another page. And yet, she continues, some critics say your comeback has been too easy. That Hollywood forgives famous men faster than anyone else. A few audience members gasp again. Johnny smiles faintly. But this time, the smile doesn't reach his eyes. Too easy, he repeats. Joy nods. Yes. The tension in the studio becomes almost physical. Johnny leans back slowly, crossing one leg over the other. You know, he says thoughtfully, when you wake up every day and see your name in headlines you didn't write, when strangers decide who you are without ever meeting you. He pauses. That's not exactly easy. The audience applauds softly. Joy waits until the applause fades. Then she asks the question that changes everything. Johnny, she says calmly, do you believe you were treated unfairly, or do you believe you simply didn't like being held accountable? The studio goes dead silent. Even the cameras seem to freeze. Johnny stares at her. For several seconds, he says nothing. One of the hosts looks toward the producers, clearly unsure whether to intervene. But Joy doesn't break eye contact. Johnny finally speaks. And when he does, his voice is quieter than before. Joy, that's a very interesting question. The tension in the room becomes electric. The audience leans forward in their seats. Because everyone can feel it now. This interview is no longer just an interview. It's becoming something far more explosive. And Johnny Depp's next words will decide exactly where this story goes next. Johnny Depp's eyes remain fixed on Joy Behar. The silence in the studio stretches so long that even the audience begins to shift in their seats. Somewhere offstage, a producer whispers urgently into a headset. One of the cameras slowly zooms in, capturing every subtle expression crossing Johnny's face. Joy doesn't move. Her hands rest calmly on the table in front of her, pen still between her fingers. She's waiting. Johnny finally exhales. A slow breath. Then he leans slightly forward. You asked if I was treated unfairly, or if I simply didn't like being held accountable. His voice is calm, but there's something new beneath it now, something sharper. The audience leans in. Joy nods. Yes. Johnny tilts his head. Well, he says quietly, accountability is a fascinating word. A few murmurs ripple through the audience. He continues. It assumes something very specific, doesn't it? Joy raises an eyebrow. And what's that? Johnny's fingers drum lightly on the armrest of his chair. That someone did the thing they're being held accountable for. A small wave of applause breaks out from part of the audience. Joy glances briefly toward the crowd, then back at Johnny. But public perception doesn't appear out of thin air, she says. Stories, accusations, testimonies, those shape how people see things. Johnny nods slowly. They do. And when those stories come from people close to you, Joy adds carefully, they tend to carry weight. The room grows tense again. Everyone knows what she's referring to. The long, bitter legal conflict that dominated headlines and social media. Johnny shifts slightly in his seat. You're talking about my past relationship. Joy doesn't say the name, but everyone in the room knows she means Amber Heard. Yes, Joy replies quietly. For a moment, Johnny looks down at his hands. The rings glint under the studio lights. Then he looks back up. You know, he begins slowly. There's a strange thing about being in the public eye. Joy listens carefully. People think they know you, Johnny continues. They read headlines, watch a few clips, hear a rumor repeated enough times, and suddenly they're certain about who you are. The audience listens silently. But they weren't there, he adds softly. Joy taps her pen once on the table. Yet millions followed the trial. Johnny nods. They did. And some of the testimony was difficult to hear, she presses. Johnny's expression tightens slightly. Yes, he says. Joy leans forward. So when people ask whether Hollywood should welcome you back with open arms, they're really asking whether the industry ignores serious accusations when the person involved is powerful enough. A wave of murmurs moves through the audience again. Johnny pauses before answering. I understand that question. Joy nods slightly. But do you understand why people ask it? She replies. Johnny smiles faintly. Oh, absolutely. He leans forward again, resting his elbows on his knees. But there's another question that rarely gets asked. Joy watches him closely. And what's that? Johnny's voice lowers. What happens when accusations become entertainment? The audience grows still. Johnny gestures toward the cameras around them. Television debates, viral clips, social media arguments. People picking sides like it's a sporting event. Joy responds immediately. But the accusations were serious. Yes, Johnny agrees. They were. And serious things deserve scrutiny. Johnny nods again. They do. He pauses. Then he adds quietly. But scrutiny should go both ways. The audience applauds softly. Joy doesn't react to the applause. Instead, she flips another page in her notes. Some critics say you rebuilt your public image by leaning heavily on fan support, she says. Johnny chuckles slightly. Fan support? Yes, Joy says. Millions of people online defending you, celebrating your return. Johnny spreads his hands lightly. Well, I never asked them to do that. But you benefit from it, Joy replies. Johnny shrugs. I benefit from people believing in fairness. The crowd claps again, louder this time. One of the other hosts shifts nervously in her seat. Johnny, she interjects gently, trying to ease the tension. Let's talk about your creative process again. Your characters have always had such depth. Joy glances toward her colleague, but doesn't interrupt. Johnny smiles politely. Thank you. But before the conversation can fully change direction, Joy speaks again. There's something else I'm curious about. The audience groans softly, sensing another difficult question coming. Johnny laughs under his breath. I had a feeling. Joy smiles. You've built a career playing outsiders, misunderstood figures. Characters who don't quite fit into society. Johnny nods slowly. That's true. She tilts her head. Do you see yourself that way in real life? Johnny pauses. The question seems to catch him slightly off guard. An outsider? Yes. Johnny thinks for a moment. Then he leans back. I suppose, in some ways, I always have. The audience listens quietly. When I first came to Hollywood, Johnny continues, I wasn't interested in fame. I wanted to make strange films, play unusual people. A few audience members laugh softly. Joy smiles. That part you succeeded at. Johnny grins briefly. But being an outsider also means something else, he adds. Joy raises an eyebrow. What's that? You become easy to misunderstand. The room grows quiet again. Joy studies him carefully. But some would argue that your personal controversies weren't about misunderstanding, she says. They were about behavior. Johnny's smile fades slightly. Behavior can also be misunderstood. Joy leans back in her chair now. The tension between them feels almost like a chess match. Each move carefully considered. Each word weighed. Johnny, she says slowly, do you think your career would have survived if you weren't already a beloved star? The audience murmurs again. Johnny raises his eyebrows. That's an interesting hypothetical. Humor me, Joy replies. Johnny thinks for a moment. Then he answers honestly. I don't know. The audience reacts with surprised murmurs. Joy nods. That's probably the most honest answer anyone could give. Johnny smiles faintly. Well, honesty is what you asked for. Joy flips another page in her notes. But before she can ask her next question, something unexpected happens. A voice from the audience suddenly calls out. We love you, Johnny. The crowd erupts into cheers and applause. Johnny looks toward the audience, surprised. He gives a small wave. Joy watches the reaction carefully. The room is now filled with clapping, whistles, and shouting. For a moment, the interview is completely overtaken by the audience's enthusiasm. But Joy raises her hand. The applause slowly fades. Then she says something that instantly brings the tension back. You see, she says calmly, gesturing toward the crowd, that kind of reaction is exactly what fascinates people. Johnny looks back at her. Joy continues. Because while some people cheer, others still have serious questions. The room grows quiet again. Johnny nods slowly. And they should. Joy leans forward once more. So let me ask you one of those questions. Johnny braces slightly. Joy's voice softens, but the intensity behind it increases. Do you believe the public truly knows the full story, or only the version you wanted them to see? Gasps ripple across the audience. Johnny doesn't respond immediately. The cameras zoom closer. The tension is now thicker than ever, because the next thing he says could change the entire direction of the conversation. Johnny inhales slowly, and when he finally speaks, his voice carries a tone no one expected. Joy, he says quietly, if you're asking whether the public has the full story. He pauses. The audience holds its breath. The answer might surprise you. The studio feels smaller now. The bright lights seem hotter. The air feels heavier. And every single person in the audience can sense it. The moment when an interview quietly crosses a line and becomes something far more unpredictable. Johnny Depp's words hang in the air. If you're asking whether the public has the full story, the answer might surprise you. For a second, no one moves. Even Joy Behar looks slightly intrigued now, her usual confident rhythm interrupted by the hint of something unexpected. Surprise me, she says calmly. The audience chuckles nervously. Johnny shifts in his chair, leaning back slightly, his fingers resting on the armrest. You see, he begins slowly, when something becomes global news, it stops being about truth. Joy tilts her head. And what does it become? Johnny gives a faint, tired smile. A narrative. The word lands heavily. The audience murmurs again. Johnny continues. Millions of people watching clips, headlines, snippets of testimony, each person forming their own version of the story. Joy nods slightly. That's the nature of public life. Johnny raises a finger gently. But here's the strange part. He pauses. The loudest version of the story often isn't the most accurate. Another ripple moves through the crowd. Joy leans forward. But courts exist to determine accuracy. Johnny nods. Yes. And the public watched that process unfold. Johnny's expression becomes thoughtful. They watched pieces of it. Joy responds quickly. Are you saying the public misunderstood what happened? Johnny exhales slowly. I'm saying the public saw what the media chose to amplify. The tension builds again. One of the other hosts glances toward the producers behind the cameras. The producers are whispering intensely now, clearly aware that the conversation has taken a sharp turn into dangerous territory. Joy folds her hands. You're suggesting media bias. Johnny shrugs slightly. I'm suggesting media appetite. The audience reacts with a mix of laughter and murmurs. Joy smiles thinly. That's a clever way of putting it. Johnny tilts his head. It's also accurate. Joy taps her pen on the desk again. Tap, tap, tap. You know, she says, there are people who would say this sounds like deflection. Johnny laughs quietly. Deflection? Yes, Joy replies. That instead of addressing the criticism directly, you're blaming the system around it. Johnny looks at her carefully. Joy, do you believe systems are perfect? Joy raises an eyebrow. No, neither do I, Johnny says. A small wave of applause moves through the audience. But Joy isn't finished. And yet, she continues, some people believe your supporters turned a very serious issue into a popularity contest. Johnny's smile fades slightly. That wasn't my doing. But it benefited you. Johnny nods once. Yes. He pauses. But that doesn't make it comfortable. Joy studies his face. What do you mean by that? Johnny leans forward again, his voice quieter now. Imagine waking up one day and realizing your personal life has become the world's favorite argument. The audience grows silent. People who have never met you debating whether you're a monster or a victim. Johnny continues. Memes. TikToks. Reaction videos. He gestures vaguely toward the cameras. Entertainment. Joy watches him closely. And you're saying you didn't want that? Johnny shakes his head slowly. No human being would want that. A few audience members nod in agreement. But Joy presses again. Yet some critics say you leaned into it afterward. Johnny frowns slightly. How so? Public appearances, Joy says. Fans celebrating your return. Social media trends declaring victory. Johnny chuckles softly. I didn't invent the internet. The audience laughs. Joy smirks slightly. Fair point. For a moment, the tension eases. But only briefly. Joy flips another page in her notes. Let's talk about accountability again. Johnny's expression tightens just slightly. Joy continues. Some people believe powerful men in Hollywood often recover from scandal much faster than women. A few people in the audience shift uncomfortably. Johnny pauses before responding. That may be true in some cases. Joy nods. So why should your case be different? Johnny leans back slowly. Because every case is different. Joy replies instantly. But power structures are not. Johnny studies her carefully. You're framing this as a systemic issue. Joy shrugs lightly. Many people do. Johnny's eyes narrow slightly, not in anger, but in concentration. Then perhaps the real question isn't about me. Joy tilts her head. Oh! Johnny gestures toward the audience. Perhaps the question is why the public became so invested in this story. Joy laughs softly. That's easy. Why? Johnny smiles faintly. Because people love conflict. The audience laughs. But they also love redemption stories, Joy adds. Johnny nods. Yes. And they also love downfall stories. The audience murmurs again. Joy continues. So which one are you, Johnny? The question hangs in the air. Redemption or downfall? Johnny looks at the audience. Then back at Joy. Well, he says slowly, that depends on who you ask. Joy leans forward again. I'm asking you. Johnny chuckles. You're putting me in quite the dramatic narrative. Joy grins. That's television. Johnny nods. Yes, it is. For a moment, both of them simply look at each other. Two experienced performers. Two strong personalities. Neither willing to fully back down. Then Johnny says something that makes the entire room go still. You know what the strangest part of all this was? Joy raises an eyebrow. What? Johnny's voice lowers. The silence. Joy frowns slightly. Silence. Yes. Johnny nods. When the headlines were loud, when the accusations were everywhere, when the entire world seemed to be arguing. He pauses. Many people who actually knew me said nothing. The audience murmurs. Joy considers this. Perhaps they were afraid. Johnny shrugs. Perhaps. Joy asks quietly. Did that hurt? Johnny doesn't answer immediately. His eyes drift toward the floor for a brief moment. Then he looks back up. Yes. The word is simple, but it lands heavily. Joy studies him again. And now? Johnny smiles faintly. Now I've learned something. Joy leans forward. What's that? Johnny glances toward the audience again. That truth has a strange way of surviving, even when people try to bury it. The crowd applauds softly. Joy waits for the applause to fade. Then she asks the question that shifts the entire atmosphere again. Johnny, she says calmly, if someone watching this interview still believes the accusations against you, what would you say to them? The audience gasps. One of the producers offstage puts a hand on his forehead. Johnny looks directly at Joy. His expression now completely serious. No smile. No charm. Just calm intensity. He speaks slowly. I would say they have the right to their opinion. The audience murmurs. Joy nods slightly. That's diplomatic. Johnny continues. But I would also say something else. Joy waits. The room holds its breath. Johnny leans closer to the table. And in a voice quieter than anything he has said all evening, he delivers a line that instantly changes the mood in the studio. Be careful who you decide someone is before you know the full truth. The audience erupts into mixed reactions, applause, murmurs, whispers. But Joy Behar is not finished yet. She looks down at her notes, then back at Johnny. And what she says next is the question no one in the studio expected her to ask. The applause fades slowly, like the echo of a distant storm rolling away. But the tension inside the studio of The View doesn't disappear with it. If anything, it grows heavier. Johnny Depp sits calmly on the couch, hands folded, expression composed again. But now there's a visible alertness in his posture. The kind of quiet focus someone has when they know the next moment could go anywhere. Across from him, Joy Behar glances down at her notes. The room is so quiet that the faint rustle of paper sounds unusually loud. The other hosts exchange quick glances. One of them shifts slightly in her seat, clearly aware that this interview has become something far bigger than a normal celebrity segment. Joy lifts her head again. Her eyes lock onto Johnny. Johnny, she says calmly. Earlier you said something interesting. Johnny nods slightly. I say many interesting things. A few people in the audience laugh nervously. Joy doesn't. You said people should be careful deciding who someone is before knowing the full truth. Johnny nods again. Yes. Joy leans forward. So here's my question. The studio lights seem to intensify as every camera zooms closer. Joy continues. If the full truth matters so much, why do you think so many people still remain divided about you? The audience exhales collectively. This isn't just a question about a trial anymore. It's a question about reputation, about public memory, about whether someone can ever truly control their own story. Johnny pauses. For several seconds, he doesn't speak. And in that silence, you can feel the weight of the moment pressing down on the room. Finally, he answers. Because truth rarely travels alone. Joy raises an eyebrow. What travels with it? Johnny gives a small, almost philosophical smile. Emotion. The audience murmurs. Johnny continues. People connect to stories emotionally. They see parts of themselves in the characters involved. Joy nods slightly. So you think people projected their own experiences onto your situation? Johnny shrugs lightly. It's human nature. Joy tilts her head. But doesn't that also mean some people saw behavior they found disturbing? Johnny doesn't argue. Yes. The honesty in that answer makes the audience react again with quiet murmurs. Joy watches him carefully. So you understand why some viewers still question you. Johnny nods slowly. I do. Joy leans back slightly in her chair now. For the first time since the interview began, her posture relaxes. Well, she says, that might be the most straightforward answer we've heard all day. A few chuckles ripple through the audience. Johnny smiles faintly. Straightforward can be refreshing. One of the other hosts finally jumps in again, clearly sensing an opportunity to soften the atmosphere. Johnny, she says with a grin, before this turns into the most intense episode we've ever done, can we talk about your work again? The audience laughs with relief. Johnny chuckles too. I would welcome that change. The host continues. You've created some of the most memorable characters in film history, like Captain Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean. Fans still adore that role. The crowd cheers immediately. Johnny lifts his hands in playful surrender. That pirate refuses to leave me alone. Laughter spreads across the studio. But Joy raises one last finger. Before we move on completely, the audience groans dramatically. Johnny laughs. Of course. Joy smiles. Just one final question. Johnny nods. All right. Joy studies him for a moment. Then she asks, after everything you've been through, fame, controversy, public judgment, if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be? The tone of the question is different. Not confrontational. Reflective. Johnny looks genuinely thoughtful now. He leans back, staring briefly toward the ceiling lights. Then he answers quietly. I would tell him, don't read the headlines. The audience laughs softly. Johnny continues. And remember that the people who truly know you matter more than the millions who don't. A wave of applause spreads across the room. Joy nods slowly. That's probably good advice for anyone. Johnny smiles. I suspect it is. The conversation finally shifts. The hosts begin discussing Johnny's creative work again. His love for music, his unusual approach to building characters, the way he disappears into roles. The tension slowly dissolves into something warmer. But the energy in the room never quite returns to normal. Because everyone present knows they've just witnessed something unusual. Not a rehearsed press interview, but a real clash of perspectives. By the time the segment ends, the audience rises to its feet in applause. Johnny stands. He shakes hands with the hosts. When he reaches Joy, the moment is brief but respectful. Joy smiles. Thanks for answering the tough ones. Johnny grins slightly. Thanks for asking them. The crowd cheers again as he exits the stage. But the story doesn't end there. Because within minutes of the episode airing, the internet explodes. Clips of the tense exchange between Johnny Depp and Joy Behar spread across social media platforms. On TikTok, short edits of their sharpest moments rack up millions of views within hours. On YouTube, commentators break down every line of dialogue, every facial expression. And on X, Twitter, the debate ignites instantly. Some viewers praise Joy for asking hard questions. Others applaud Johnny for remaining calm under pressure. Hashtags begin trending. Clips circulate with dramatic captions. Johnny Depp faces toughest interview yet. Joy Behar doesn't hold back. Hollywood's most intense talk show moment. Media outlets start publishing articles analyzing the exchange. Body language experts appear on television. Entertainment journalists debate whether the interview was fair or confrontational. And the public does what it always does. They pick sides. But beyond the noise of the internet, something quieter also happens. Many viewers begin discussing the deeper themes behind the conversation. Accountability, public judgment, the strange power of media narratives. The interview becomes more than just celebrity drama. It becomes a cultural moment. And weeks later, people are still sharing the clip, still debating what it meant. still asking who handled the moment better, Johnny Depp or Joy Behar. But now we want to hear from you. If you had been sitting in that audience, watching the tension unfold live on stage, what would you have thought? Do you think the questions were fair? Or did the interview go too far? Tell us your opinion in the comments below. And if you enjoy dramatic behind-the-scenes stories like this, moments where celebrity interviews turn into unforgettable showdowns, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, like this video, and turn on notifications. Because the next story we bring you might be even more explosive. Clapperboard.